Welcome to MACC Talk, a Middle Tennessee podcast from Mott Haven Arts and Cultural Center in Hendersonville, Tennessee. I'm your announcer, Kennedy Galpin. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Holmes Pest Control, offering safe, eco-friendly solutions to pest concerns in our community.
Thank you, Kennedy, and welcome everyone to MACC Talk. I'm your host, John Pitcher. We like to think of the MACC as a cultural town square where we encourage everyone to be their creative best. So, Kennedy, what sort of creative things have you been up to lately?
So recently, I've gotten back into record shopping, as per usual. I'm a big music listener. I've been collecting a lot of older albums, including those of Iron Maiden, which is kind of
and this is, we're talking vinyl here. We're talking about the classic stuff,
and not
right?
like brand new ones where they're still sealed or anything like that. I'm talking like pre-owned, turned into a record store, used vinyl. So they're aged.
And you can kind of see the wear and tear on the album covers?
Yeah.
Okay. And do you prefer vinyl listening?
I like it. I listen to the radio a lot typically, so it's pretty easy just to switch over to the vinyl player on my Kenwood receiver that I have. So it's easy. I do CDs as well, but I've had those for
some people swear by vinyl
years.
though. They say it sounds warmer.
Yeah, I can hear that. It definitely has that quality to it. Plus, the sound of the static is very kind of nostalgic to me.
Yeah, I think that certainly certain kinds of music, instrumental music, that kind of music, jazz, I could see where connoisseurs would prefer that
or
sound.
even like older rock too. Like Fleetwood Mac just sounds incredible on vinyl.
Yeah,
it really lends.
Well, it was done. It was created for vinyl, wasn't it? It was 1977.
They cut Silver Springs to put it on vinyl.
Wow.
And Silver Springs is a great song.
It is. Okay. All right. Well, Kennedy, let's go ahead and introduce today's guest. Rick Murray is the owner of Memories by Murray, an award-winning photography company located in Middle Tennessee. One of Rick's unusual specialties is astrophotography, the art of photographing planets, stars, galaxies, and other celestial phenomena. He also specializes in aerial photography, using drones to capture breathtaking photos of storms, including the occasional terrifying tornado. Rick's photos have been viewed around the world, and I love checking out his images on social media. We're excited that he's here today. Rick Murray, welcome to MACC Talk.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, let's start off with something that is new for a lot of us. What is astrophotography, and how is it different from just looking through a telescope in your backyard?
Well, there are a lot of ways we could go with it, but basically astrophotography is marrying a camera to either an extremely strong telephoto lens or to a telescope to capture images of the sky, sometimes the night sky, sometimes the daytime sky if you're looking at the sun, or sometimes the moon. But basically, it's a very specialized field. There is specialized equipment available for it, but a lot of people actually get into it and do quite well with just a plain old SLR, digital camera, if you will, married to the back of a cheaper telescope. As you progress more into it, the equipment, software, all the things become a bit more expensive, but still there's a path where anybody wants to get into it.
Yeah, I guess people could just start off with a smartphone camera though, couldn't they?
They could.
If you're interested in maybe just taking a especially interesting looking moon.
You would be very disappointed with most cell phone images or smartphone images of the moon because while it appears much larger than a star or anything that you see in the night sky, it's not a very big object, and you really don't have very good zoom options on most of these cameras. But what you can do is, particularly with some of the newer iPhones, you can do some really nice wide field shots of stars, constellations, and so forth. Last year, we had the Aurora Borealis visible here twice. And the best images I captured did not come from a telescope or from an SLR. They came from an iPhone 15 Pro Max.
Wow.
It's amazing what it can do with that.
I was just wondering because it could be kind of intimidating for the beginner.
It can be, but there has been a development in the last 3 years that has really made a very easy on-ramp into the world of astrophotography, and that's called smart telescopes. And those are devices that marry the camera, the telescope, a tracking mount, which is used to track objects across the sky as the Earth rotates.
Right.
And they're very affordable.
Okay. Well, and that, why don't we delve into that? What sort of equipment does a citizen scientist need to have? And I use that term citizen scientist because a lot of astrophotographers consider themselves to be citizen scientists.
That's true.
Because a lot of them are taking images of phenomena that maybe haven't been seen before. They're contributing to the overall knowledge that we have of what's in the sky.
Correct. That is correct, John. In fact, recently there have been several new supernova, exploding stars, if you will, that have been discovered by people with smart telescopes, just because the supernova were predicted to happen. They happened to be looking in the right place and imaging at the right time, and captured it. So it's it's for a long, long time now. Most of the asteroids and small dwarf planets, as they're called these days, have been discovered by amateurs. So it's not unusual.
Right. Well, your tools include telescopes, and I imagine that you mentioned the smart telescope, and maybe go into that a little bit more, but what are also the other kinds of telescopes that you might use?
I've got, let me think. I think I've got 7 telescopes now. I had to count them in my mind. My 2 largest ones are called Schmidt-Cassegrain telescopes. They're fairly large. They are reflector type telescopes in that they use mirrors to capture and focus the light and then point it to a single eyepiece. Or if you remove the eyepiece, you can put a camera back there and it'll point it to the camera. There are problems with those for astrophotography, at least for me. I was never very successful with them. Great moon shots, great solar shots, planetary. If you want to photograph planets, any larger scope like that is the way to go. But for what I like to do, the wide field type of photography where you capture an entire nebula or an entire galaxy, they come up a bit short. And they're slow, and that's part of the problem with when you're doing astrophotography. Most of your, particularly deep sky, which is the nebula, the galaxies, star images, requires long exposure times. And the only way to mitigate those exposure times is to have a very fast lens, fast in terms of light gathering ability. You may have heard of f-stops in traditional cameras. Well, both of the Schmidt-Cassegrains that I have are f10 natively. That's very, very slow in the astrophotography world. I can bring them down to 6.7, which is a little bit better, but not great. Most of the newer crop of smart telescopes are f3 something, f4 something, much faster.
Much faster, very low number. And you mentioned rotation, and I'm sort of interested in that because we sort of just sitting around here talking, we have this sense that Monhaven is completely still and
relative to its surroundings, right?
And it's hard to believe that actually the Earth is spinning on its axis. I mean, we're moving, but also the galaxy we're in itself is moving at an incredibly fast speed. I believe it's something like 1.3 million miles an hour. So we're all in motion here.
We are.
The galaxies themselves, with your deep space objects, are moving away from us.
Some are.
So everything is in motion. And that can affect, if you're having a long exposure, generally what comes in your picture, right?
That's correct. And if you don't have some sort of mount, and a mount is basically the physical device that connects the telescope, or what we call the OTA, the optical tube assembly, but just think of it as the telescope itself, to a tripod or to a mounting base. And what it does is, once you orient it so that it knows which direction it's pointing, it rotates in a way to compensate for the rotation of the Earth. So if the Earth is rotating this way and you see an object going left to right, it's going to move in the opposite direction to keep the scope pointing on your object for hours at a time. Usually,
which you need for the exposure, right?
You do.
Because otherwise you're going to be having what? You're going to have blurs or streaks?
You're going to have blurs. Without a tracking mount, you might pull off a 2 or 3 second exposure, maybe, before you start getting non-round stars. And that's the bane of every astrophotographer. You want your stars to be just like we see them, pinpoint. And the only way to hold them pinpoint is to track. And there are various ways of doing that, but you have to do it. Okay. Because a typical deep sky image, let's say you're photographing the Andromeda galaxy, which is very famous image. I usually, at the minimum, will go 4 or 5 hours of exposure to get that image. And that's capturing, well, usually 60-second exposures, 30 to 60-second exposures. So however many I can capture during that time frame. And then more times than not, I will actually shoot an object over multiple nights and then stack all those images from the different sessions together. And that gives me 7 or 8 hours worth of imaging. The more exposure time that you have on an object, the better the signal to noise ratios, which basically means it doesn't look grainy and the colors are more accurate and you get more detail.
Yeah. And you got a lot of really spectacular color too.
You do.
That you wouldn't see otherwise.
Yeah.
Which is really very artistic. We're speaking with the terrific astrophotographer Rick Murray. We'll be back after this important message.
Holmes Pest Control is a proud supporter of the MACC's Between the Lines Healing Arts program for military veterans. The healing arts foster self-awareness and promote emotional wellness through self-talk, thought restructuring, and personal goal setting. Veterans also build social skills and community through the arts in a positive group setting. This creative process supports emotional processing and growth on the path to healing. This message is supported by Holmes Pest Control, which uses safe and environmentally friendly methods to address a variety of pest issues. For more information, call 615-391-5708.
We're back with the Middle Tennessee commercial photographer Rick Murray, who's developed quite a following for his astrophotography. Tell me about your cameras. What sort of cameras does an astrophotographer need?
Well, once again, you can start out with a cell phone for certain things. I use mirrorless cameras. I used to use just DSLRs, digital. You see what you see through the lens type cameras. They work fine. There are some adjustments to those cameras that can be made where you actually have there is a filter built into every digital camera that blocks infrared radiation. And for a lot of the deep sky images, you want that radiation to get through. You want to be able to image it. So a lot of people get their cameras what they call modded or modified to remove that filter so that they can capture that portion of it. Then you have dedicated astrophotography cameras. I own several of those, and my smart telescopes all have those built in. And that's where the camera actually is modified. It's designed specifically for capturing light sources for long, long periods of time with a very low signal to noise ratio.
And they look different too from like the typical DSLR.
You would not recognize them.
Some of the ones I've seen look like cylinders.
They do. They're more and more looking like cylinders now, but one of the ones I've got looks like a doorknob, basically. You know? So, but it's great. If I'm going to image a planet, you have to use something like that. You're not going to get anything in the DSLR.
Wow.
You're just not.
Yeah. Well, thinking about all the things you do makes me appreciate historical figures like Galileo all the more, to think about how much people like that who just creating these telescopes revolutionized our understanding of who we are and, the heavens and all that is related to that. I mean, we would have no idea about orbits, without the telescope. We had no idea that, we're planets orbit suns, moons orbit planets.
It's not everything
kind of thing. You can't always, again, like I said before, we don't have this sense just sitting here that everything is really in motion.
That's true.
So and those are the kinds of things that telescopes can let us know. let me ask you, I can only imagine that a lot of astrophotographers, maybe they begin with either a passing interest or maybe even a deep interest in astronomy.
That's true.
So tell me a little bit about that, because I mean, I would imagine you'd have to know something about astronomy to even know what to shoot.
I can share my story. I've been kind of a space nerd all my life, and I was fortunate enough to grow up during the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo eras. I still remember the magic of watching Neil Armstrong step on the moon.
Oh, I remember that too, 1969.
And that's right. In fact, the 56th anniversary was this week. And I was always intrigued and fascinated by it. And I remember my father bought me a telescope when I was young, and I did the usual thing. The low-hanging fruit. You find Saturn and look at the rings, or you see craters on the moon, those sorts of things. But even then, I was always fascinated with cameras. And I remember trying to take my parents' Kodak Brownie,
those cameras.
Holding it up to the eyepiece, hoping I got something. I didn't. But even then, I would see in science textbooks, I would see images that professional astronomers were capturing. I'm thinking, I'd like to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And then, I got older, went to college, started, got married, work career started, and those kind of things kind of slip in the background. But what brought me back into it was when I realized in late 2016 that we were going to have the opportunity to see a total solar eclipse the following August here in Hendersonville. Mm-hmm. And I thought, this is divine inspiration. This is meant to be. So that's when I bought the Schmidt-Cassegrain scopes, Celestron scopes, and I bought the appropriate software that I needed to capture, and fortunately pulled that off. And I think I pulled it off quite well. But it was a nerve-wracking experience. So what happened is after that, how you get when you gear up for a big event, maybe an athlete for a big game or a musician for a big concert, and then it's over with, you get that immense sense of letdown. Mm-hmm. And that's the way I felt after the eclipse. And I thought, I've got all this expensive equipment. Why not see what I can do with it? So I started imaging planets. I started imaging, obviously, the moon. I've been practicing on it and tried to do deep sky. I tried to get a couple of galaxies, tried to get some nebula. Ran into the problems I mentioned earlier about the scopes just being too slow. Mm-hmm. That coupled with a major dose of me not knowing what I was doing at the time. And I kind of got away from it until 3 years ago when I heard about smart telescopes. I started seeing these beautiful images from people that really didn't know a great deal about astrophotography or astronomy in general. I'm thinking, that can't be. A $400, $500, $600 telescope all in one cannot outperform thousands of dollars worth of semi-professional gear. I was wrong.
Wow.
I was wrong.
Well, I guess maybe that explains the trend, because I'm seeing more and more astrophotography and really fascinating images on social media everywhere, on YouTube, on everywhere. And I guess maybe the emergence of these smart telescopes and some of this newer equipment, which makes it more accessible
It does.
to just your rank and file very good photographer.
Yeah.
Obviously that might partly explain it.
And the advantage that I have, at least I think that I have, is I've been a long-time professional photographer.
Right.
And I understand how to make Lightroom, Photoshop, all the other tools work for me. And then I have purchased a lot of the specialized astrophotography software is free, but there's some of it that's not free. And I've gotten a pretty good arsenal of those types of tools. But I like being able to capture, even with a $400 telescope or $900, whatever you want to say, and see how much I can pull out of that image. Mm-hmm. To me, just as it comes out of the camera or the telescope, it's not good enough. So I take it and I run through the traditional astrophotography process, which takes hours to get that final image and make sure that I can pull out all the detail. And one thing that I do, let's say I've imaged the Orion Nebula, which is a beautiful fall-winter target. It's one of my favorite things to shoot, the brilliant color. And I will pull up NASA or Hubble images or whatever, professional astronomy images of it, to make sure that when I'm processing that I'm getting as close as I can without introducing artifacts or detail that's not real. And you can do that with a digital camera very easily. Just look at the AI stuff that's out there and you know what I'm talking about. But that way that's my reality check. I'm thinking, okay, I thought this was a bit of detail right down here in the corner. And I look at the NASA image, I'll be doggone, it was. So, I want to be accurate. I don't want, I tend to pop my colors, but I don't oversaturate. I want them to be vivid. And you had mentioned earlier something about it being like art, and to some degree it is. It's a perfect melding of science and art. And if you look at 100 images of the Orion Nebula that people share on social media, they're going to look different. You'll have a handful that are pretty accurate, but some of them, they are literally out of this world. And
literally.
That's where their muse is driving them in a different direction than mine. Mine always goes back, and when I'm processing, I'm always reined in by the science. I want it to be accurate.
Well, I am of the opinion that it definitely is an art form when it's done very well. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about having you come on to the podcast. Let me ask you a little bit more about sort of the artistic elements. Ansel Adams very famously would pre-visualize, his images before he would take any exposures, any shots. I would imagine that kind of thing would be very, very helpful for an astrophotographer. Because you really kind of have to have a sense in mind of something that is so remote, that is thousands of light years away, of maybe what you want.
Well, what I do, if I'm going to shoot a new deep sky object, I research that object to see what does it look like? What are the colors? What filters do I need to capture hydrogen alpha, oxygen 3, different.
And those have colors, right? So that's what's coming
basically
through.
They are gases that emit or reflect light at different wavelengths, and you use different filters to block out light you don't want, like light pollution, and allow those narrow pieces of the spectrum to get through, and then you've captured an accurate image of it. But I'll generally take a look at it, then I'll say, okay, how do I need to orient the frame, the imaging frame, to capture it and make it look the way I want it to look? And I want it to look like a work of art when I'm done with it, because to me, there's very few things more beautiful than looking at the night sky.
Yeah, well, some of those incredible nebulae, I think, would make amazing posters in your typical MIT student's dorm room. They're so incredibly beautiful.
Yeah, unlike some of the posters I had in my dorm room.
Right. Well, of course, I'd have Linda Ronstadt. But you mentioned Orion, and I just have to ask you: do you have a favorite season to photograph the night skies? Fall and winter, especially for me, is always my favorite.
And there are a couple of reasons why we call the fall and winter, late fall through really early spring, we call that nebula season. And I'm a nebula guy. Galaxies, yes, they're pretty. Particularly, I think you've got, that looks like that might be Andromeda.
That's Andromeda right in front of me.
That's my favorite one, but which
is closest to us too.
It is, and it actually has two companion. Actually, has a lot more than two. They know now, companion galaxies. But that is spectacular in and of itself. But a lot of galaxies, there's very little color. I want to see the color. I want to see it. And emission nebula are the most colorful ones. They're the easiest to capture. Orion is one of those. Then you have reflection nebula, and then you have kind of a hybrid. I think in what I sent you, I think I sent you the Horsehead and Flame Nebula, and that's a tricky one because you got a combination of reflection and emission nebula, and typically you have to use different filters for each one. But I've been able to get that to work out pretty well for me.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the filters and trying to detect certain colors in gases. That's one of the things that I believe the NASA and other scientists are trying to do now is they try to detect gases around planets that have been discovered.
They do, yeah.
To try to see, well, would anything here suggest life on a different planet? It's hard to do from that distance, and you can't actually, see the planets. You see the tug of the gravity.
That's correct.
You might see, and you can see color sometimes. So that's maybe what you might have as a clue. Right. Although everything now is still very much speculation still.
Very much so.
So
I would love nothing better in my life to see confirmation of life, on another planet.
Right. Yeah. And I guess that's maybe the next big discovery out there. We'll see.
I hope so.
We'll see. I have right here your stunning photo of the Rosette Nebula. And it's so full of color. It definitely reminds me of a painting. And I'm wondering, do you have to do a lot more work to photograph those deep space objects than something closer in, something in our solar system?
Actually, for me personally, imaging planets is much more difficult.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
It is. When you image a planet, what you're doing is it's a completely different process than photographing a deep sky object. You go through a process called lucky imaging, and that's where you take a specialized camera, usually an astrophotography camera that basically is a digital video camera, and you're capturing, let's say you're imaging Mars, you're probably capturing hundreds, if not thousands of frames per second. And then you run it through software that looks at every one of those frames. And by frame, I'm talking about a separate picture. And the reason that works so well is when you're looking through the atmosphere and you see stars twinkling, for example, that's because of distortions in the atmosphere. Heat, could be wind, there could be any number of things, could be a high cloud bank coming over. But when you do the lucky imaging for a planet, the software looks at every one of those images. It ranks them in terms of quality, how sharp they are. It tosses out the ones that happen to be an atmospheric distortion at the time and made it blurry. So it's, nah, you're not good, I'm not using you. And it selects only the right number of frames, and then it overlays those together. Then you process it just like you do a deep sky image.
Okay, that's fascinating.
Now, one thing that I do, but both of those that you're looking at are good examples of that, is I typically, if I'm processing a deep sky object, not always a galaxy, but certainly a nebula, I split it into two. Once I get the image kind of close to the way I want it after I've stacked all those frames, I'll split it into two parts called starred and starless. Starless, in the case of the Rosette Nebula, is where all the color is, and I'll process it to bring the detail of it out. And then I bring the stars back into it so that I'm not any elevation of color, any elevation of contrast that I do to bring out detail in the nebula part doesn't falsely impact the stars.
We're speaking with the terrific astrophotographer Rick Murray. We'll be back after this important message.
Holmes Pest Control is honored to support the MACC Between the Lines arts programming, dedicated to helping military veterans thrive. Through creative expression, veterans explore self-awareness, emotional wellness, and personal growth. The program encourages positive self-talk, goal setting, and the building of social connections in a supportive group setting, offering a powerful path towards healing. Holmes Pest Control proudly stands behind this mission while offering safe, eco-friendly solutions to pest concerns in our community. To learn more, call 615-391-5708.
We're back with the Middle Tennessee commercial photographer Rick Murray, who's developed quite a following for his astrophotography. Tell me a little bit more about this whole process of stacking, because I find that fascinating, and it reminds me of painters with their textures and layers. Tell me a little bit about that.
There is some similarity to that, but basically stacking is nothing more than overlaying tens, hundreds, thousands in some cases of images of the same thing.
Which is where you get your color, though.
Well, that's and detail.
And detail and texture and everything else.
You improve the signal to noise of it. But what it basically does is you take, let's say, 4 hours worth of imaging. Or let's make it simpler. Let's say you take 1 hour of imaging and you're shooting at 30 seconds exposures. That means that shutter, if you will, is staying open for 30 seconds at a time. That's an image or a frame. Then you shoot another one. Then you shoot another one. And then after an hour, you take that collective 200 images and then you run it through software that stacks that. And what it does the same thing as I mentioned on planets. It looks at each image and decides, nope, that is a Starlink satellite coming through right now, or that's a 737 coming into
We've got a lot of pollution.
So I'm going to throw that out. And it keeps only the good frames, overlays them. So in effect, what you have is, let's say it used all 200 of those frames. Instead of having 200 30-second exposures, you've effectively got a 1 hour look at that object, where it's the same as if your camera had been open, their shutter for 1 solid hour. And it's pretty neat how it works, quite frankly.
I'm wondering how things like, and you mentioned this is something that you might not think about right off the bat, but things like satellites and
big problems.
Planes. What about things like just weather or light pollution? Do you have to go someplace special?
I do not. Everything that I've shared with you and I share on social media has been captured in my driveway usually.
Really? And so you don't have to worry about things like light pollution?
You can compensate that with special filters. Okay. Now, you can't get rid of it all. There's a scale called the Bortle scale that defines how bad your light pollution is. A Bortle 1 sky, for example, would be something you'd see in New Mexico. Mm-hmm. Just perfectly clear. The larger the number, the worse the light pollution. Now, the area of Hendersonville I live in is between a Bortle 5 and 6, mm-hmm. and you'd be amazed at what you can do with the right filters with that.
Wow. So you don't have to go to Chile onto a mountaintop or necessarily.
It would be nice to do that.
Or maybe you could, but
the only time I've traveled for astrophotography was in April of 2024, and I went to Metropolis, Illinois for my second solar eclipse.
Right. So sometimes you do have to travel to get special images.
That's true, because the line just cut right across the top of that, so I needed that. But no, I thought for a while, when I was trying to do deep sky imaging with those bigger telescopes I was telling you about, I thought it was hopeless because of light pollution. But now with software and certain algorithms that are out there that you can even out your background, you can extract noise, even dealing with the worst thing these days are satellites.
Yeah, because how many are up there?
And
it's like
every which way.
A zillion of them now.
And the Starlink ones are really bad.
And we need them for our cell phone service, for TV cable.
Yeah.
Just everything we do, right, is now there's a satellite for that.
But like anything else, there's a price to pay, and it's
a lot of junk up there now.
There is,
which we don't think about, and I guess at some point it all comes down, right?
Yeah, the orbit will decay eventually.
Yeah,
for sure. You remember Skylab in the 70s?
Yes, I do.
It came down. So,
you mentioned computers, and I'm wondering. Obviously, there's a lot of work that has to happen with computers and with software. Do you spend more time with the computers and software than you do with the actual telescope and camera?
I do.
Is that where a lot of the magic happens? Is that where the creativity
to me
happens?
It does. Yes, okay. Indeed. The smart telescopes that are available out there right now can produce a finished JPEG image at the end of this session, right on your phone or your tablet that you use to control it.
Oh, man.
But I look at it this way. You can take... If I'm covering a concert, and I do a lot of music photography and so forth, you'll see people in a crowd with their cell phones taking pictures of somebody performing. Mm-hmm. Well, what they're getting is a little bitty image of somebody a long, long ways away. If they're happy with it, that's great. The gear I use to capture it, I capture the type of images that end up on magazine covers.
Right.
And I say that not to brag, but it's a difference in technique. It's a difference in satisfaction level. And that's why people that are really into astrophotography will go back to the same image or to the same object, if you will, time and time again. First, we want to see it again, but I want to do better than I did the last time. Mm-hmm. Because if you're not improving, you're falling back.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned, your photo of a concert versus someone sitting on a lawn chair with their cell phone. To me, what makes this an art form, at least when it's done really well, and what I think is true is that, there's a lot of talk about technique. There's a lot of talk about equipment and everything when it comes to photography. But at the end of the day, it's knowing where to point your lens, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Basically, that's an eye.
It is.
And there's an art to that.
And there's an art even to how you frame an astro image, or any image for that matter. For example, if you're photographing Andromeda, the great spiral galaxy, you want to get all of that galaxy in there. You want all that detail. But I'm the type that I also like some, if you will, blank space around it that's not really blank, but filled with stars, to just put it in perspective so that you realize that, yes, that's that big object, but there's still thousands and thousands of stars around it. And I think the thing that surprised me the most when I got my first smart telescope, just taking a couple of random images of the sky without even trying to find an object. And I'm looking up over Hendersonville with my eyes, and I might see 100 stars. I can't begin to count the number of stars that I can get in one 30-second image.
Wow.
It's just off the scale.
Mm-hmm. Well, this might be an impossible question to answer, but do you have a favorite image, astrophotography image that you've taken? Is there one that's your Mona Lisa?
If I had to just pick one, it would be Andromeda.
Okay.
The one that I sent you.
Wow.
Because I've tried time and time again to get a good image of Andromeda that looks like something you would see, on the Science Channel or whatever. And I finally got that one. I think it was last October or November, and that was a multi-night session. And I knew I had something when I saw it coming together, and I could see color even just from the raw images coming in. I thought, maybe this is going to be a good one.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The Horsehead Nebula is pretty high on my list as well, because I had always wanted to see that as a kid. And for people that might be listening don't know what that is, it basically it's a nebula, but there is if you will, a cutout in the center of that. Looks like a chess piece, a knight turned sideways,
right? And
it looks like a horse head. And the first time I saw that coming into play, I thought, oh my! I felt like I was a 10-year-old again, and that's something I want to share with you. The smart telescopes, and really most any telescope these days, are controlled by tablets or by smartphones. Mm-hmm. The software is perfect for that. And with most of these telescopes, you can actually watch your images stacking in real time.
Wow.
So you'll see your first image. Let's say you're shooting Andromeda, and you'll see the core, the big bright center of it there, but you don't see any of those wispy bands of the
arms, right?
Yeah, you don't see any of that. But after about 10, 15 frames, you start seeing it popping out. And it's magic. Yeah. It's what it appears to be. When I bought my first two smart telescopes, and I bought two because they met different needs of mine. One would let me get closer views of objects. The other one would give me the wide field that I wanted. So you really want both. You want to be able to get something that's tight, but there are times you want that vista, kind of like the aerial photography I like to do. It's you get to see more with your eyes. And I remember pointing it at an object I'd tried to photograph for years, Orion Nebula. Dismal failure, time after time after time. I never could get anything. It was awful. This first frame, I saw it. I thought, I don't believe it. And then it stacked the second frame and the colors exploded. And I thought, my gosh, this is a $500 telescope.
Wow.
And it's doing stuff I can't do with thousands of conventional gear.
That is so fascinating. Well, you mentioned your aerial photography, and that's fairly spectacular too. I've seen some images of weather that you have taken that I think is really breathtaking. I think a lot of people would be amazed if they had been terrified at the same time if they'd seen it. Tell me a little bit about how that works, because that's one of your specialties as well.
It's something that I've, particularly capturing things like lightning, I finally figured out how to do that after all these years. And there are actually devices out there that will trigger cameras when they sense lightning.
But you use drones, right?
Do what?
You said you use drones,
Typically,
right? Your shots are from hundreds of feet in the air.
Yeah, I don't do anything like that. What I do is I'll fly the drone up. I'll put it in basically I'm hovering. If I see a storm front coming in, and particularly if I'm hearing thunder, there's going to be some lightning somewhere. So I start the video running at 4K, 60 frames a second, and just let it go. And then as soon as I see a bolt of lightning or whatever, I'll stop that capture, and that lets me find it on the video easier. It breaks the video down into chunks, so I know I can go right to the end of that and back up a little bit and catch every stage of that lightning and extract the frame that I want, and then process it as I would any other image.
Wow. They're really incredibly colorful and beautiful. And especially how the lightning lights up the sky and the clouds.
I think I sent you one from last week that I did that was a multiple lightning burst of clouds over, basically over First Baptist, Hendersonville. And it was beautiful. I didn't do anything to it except extract the image and process it.
Well, you've also, one of the things that we have here, especially in the spring here in Middle Tennessee, are the occasional tornadoes, including some pretty scary ones. And I think you have more than one image of some of those monsters.
Of those, yes.
Tell me a little bit about that. I mean, there's one in particular, I think you might be having your drone hovering again over First Baptist, and you can kind of see it out in, I guess, is it Goodlettsville?
You can, yeah.
Or is it Madison?
It was December. It was December of 2023 when the tornado came through here, and I was capturing lightning. Is what I was. I had no idea that that was going to happen. So I was trying to capture lightning, and all of a sudden the lightning got so bad that I thought I've got to get inside, and I'm not foolhardy. I'm not going to stay out there and risk anything, and I'm not going to risk my gear. But I'd never seen the frequency and the severity of lightning that I was seeing. And so I was imaging it all. And then I go into the house, my wife and sons were there, and I remember hearing one of the weather people on television saying, Hendersonville, it's on you right now. And we took shelter, and 5 days later, when we got power back, I start processing those videos, and I realized, I didn't believe it at first, but I realized that I had captured a couple of fairly significant images of lightning illuminating the funnel and the shelf cloud of that tornado. I also captured the exact moment that it hit the Madison substation that exploded, that knocked power out for so many people. I just didn't know it. Didn't know it until I, got to looking at the video.
It's a phenomenal photo, and I have to say that I learned a little bit about just how random these kinds of things can be, these kinds of disasters can be, because I believe that particular funnel was heading right for this building that we're sitting in. It was heading right for Monhaven, and I believe that not too long before it got here, it lifted off the ground.
It did, and then
it passed over Monhaven and then went back down, I think, near New Shackle Island.
Well, it hit,
and it
my neighborhood.
It caused a lot of damage in eastern Hendersonville. We're in western Hendersonville.
If you go over to where Trinity City is at, you can still see the aftermath of it there, and it hit within 200 yards of my house, and it was bad, very, very bad. But another good thing I was able to do with the drone is after it was over with, I was able to go out and survey the damage, because I do a lot of photojournalism, and I was capturing the images not only for print in the newspaper or what have you, but also for the city and the fire department, different agencies, so that they had an aerial view of what it looked like.
Okay.
I'm sure I wasn't the only one doing that, but to me, it's something I felt I needed to do.
Right.
Because
so it's a public service.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I do a lot of that just for that reason. I think that if I can help somehow, then I'll get out and fly or go photograph, whatever I need to do. It's kind of my contribution.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe one final thing. If you were, because there are a lot of people who want to do this kind of photography now, both astrophotography and aerial photography, but especially astrophotography. If someone asked you some advice on how to get started, what would you tell them?
Buy a smart telescope.
Okay.
And there are several brands out there, but the most popular are by a company called Dwarf Labs or ZWO. Z as in zebra, WO. They're both the best priced. They perform amazingly well. I mean, I got two of each of theirs, as a matter of fact. And they're very affordable, although the tariff situation has driven the prices up a bit recently, but still, they're still very affordable. And in ZWO's case, you can start out with something, their smart telescopes are called C-Stars. Mm-hmm. And you can start out there, and then yet ZWO can take you all the way to semi-professional level, because they have the cameras, they have the tracking mounts, they have the scope, all the accessories you need. So as you get better into it, and if you want to spend more and get more deeply into the hobby, that path is there for you. Mm-hmm. I heard somebody once say that the smart telescopes are like gateway drugs. Okay. To a very expensive hobby, but they don't have to be. I find that the smart telescopes allow me to do exactly what I want to do, and my older, more expensive gear just sits there and looks good.
Right. So your advice would not be, go out and spend tens of thousands of dollars.
And there are some smart telescopes out there. There's ZWO has one. No, Celestron does. It's $4,000. I wouldn't spend that much money on a smart telescope. Mm-hmm. That's me. There's a French company called Vaillantis. They're in the $2,000, $3,000 range. Unless you've just got money to burn, there's no sense. You can buy a C-Star S30 it was $350, $400 now. Mm-hmm. And it's an amazing instrument. Just amazing what you can do with it. You can buy its big brother, the S50, for $599, I think. Well, the Dwarf is around $500. And until you've gotten everything you can out of those, I don't see any reason to jump and spend a whole lot more money unless they're just not meeting your needs somehow.
Okay. Well, that's all incredibly good advice, and we appreciate your time coming in here to talk to us about this fascinating subject. Rick Murray, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, John.
You've been listening to MACC Talk from Mont Haven Arts and Cultural Center. Our mission is to educate, elevate, and encourage our community through the transformative power of the arts. If you are interested in transforming your creative life, check out our website at monthavenarts.org. Our guest today was Rick Murray, a master astrophotographer. Our podcast music was written by Nashville composer Christina Spinet. I'm Kennedy Galpin. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.